There are several things that you can do if you have a Holley carburetor and it's flooding, and generally that's the most common problem with Holley carburetors is either flooding out the vent tube or through the boosters, and then obviously you dump a bunch of gas into your intake manifold, and if you don't know this is going on, you wash your walls and ruin your engine. So it's a big problem. So the first thing you want to check is you want to remove your sight plug here, and while the engine's running, and see if your gas level should be at the very bottom of the thread. Shouldn't be necessarily dripping out. Maybe like a little wet pattern will show up, but it definitely shouldn't be running out, and it definitely should be up to the level. If it's not, your carburetor isn't going to be working properly. And how you adjust your float is you'll undo your screw. I pre-loosen this for the sake of the video because I only have one hand. And when you loosen that, you want to hop under here with a screwdriver and pop your nut off your gasket. If you don't, it'll ruin your gasket and it'll leak all over essentially. So what you want to do is, I believe that turning down takes your float down, and turning it backwards, counterclockwise, raises your float. I believe that to be the case. That would make the most sense to me. So, and then if it's not one of those things, check your fuel pressure. These Holleys, they say they can run up to 7.5 pounds of pressure, and that's a load of crap. They run about 5 to 6. Anything more than that, and they're pretty unhappy. And if it's not your level and if it's not your pressure, the next thing I would take out is your needle and seat. We'll pull that out right now. So you simply just undo your screw and pop your nut loose again. Now you can actually use your nut. See, it's kind of got like a square thing to it, and so does your needle. And you want to make sure that your needle, you count how many threads are up in the position of the part that you grab onto with. So I have about 1, 2, 3 threads up, and I'm pointing about 1 or 2 o'clock. So just unscrew that. And out comes your needle and seat. And what you want to look for is if your O-ring has gone bad, then you're not going to, you're going to be blowing fuel past the needle and seat and flooding your carb out. Also, if you have dirt in your O-ring or in your needle, that causes problems. And you can just take some carb cleaner and blow it off, and if you do have to buy another needle and seat assembly, like I have a few spare ones laying around, they're not all that expensive, and they're a good investment. So once you do that, you put that back in, and to get proper pressure, I'll put that back in after the video, but to get proper pressure to a Holley carburetor, a lot of pumps run but somewhere between 4 to 8 pounds of pressure, and generally they're more on the high end. And a fuel pressure regulator from Holley is only about $30, and it's good insurance. And you just set it to 5 pounds of pressure, and you should be fine on your pressure. What happens? Another thing that could happen is your intake manifold could get too hot and transfer the heat to your carburetor. And what this will do is it'll boil your fuel in the bowl. And when your fuel boils, it bounces your float around, and your needle and seat opens and closes and lets fuel in, and eventually overflows, and it could sink your float. So that's something to be aware of as well. To avoid that, you can use on everything I have, I run a 1-inch phenolic spacer, and that dissipates heat pretty well. So that's something I would advise looking into just anyway. You always want, when you're playing with fuel, you don't want to mess around. So you want to be, you want to feel pretty safe. You don't want to chance anything, or else you burn down your investment. And we all love our cars, and we don't want any of that. So, trying to think of if there's anything else I've missed, I've encountered. Oh, and product control these days isn't what it used to be. And floats are supposed to be a certain weight, and if the float's too heavy, it may be sunk down more, or, whatever. And you can generally adjust that out through your adjustment there, your float adjustment. But what I've seen happen is they'll get a microscopic puncture hole in these brass floats, and these brass floats are already heavier anyway, so they can't withstand the same amount of pressure. So what'll happen is they'll get a puncture, and then they'll fill with fuel ever so slightly and be even heavier. And then when that happens, they have a tendency to sink, and then you got a sunk float, and you're doing the whole overflow dance again and ruining your engine. So before you install a Holley, make sure when you're running it, and make sure when you get up to temperature that you're not flooding. And what I've seen with the boiling effect is they'll run fine when they're running, but if you shut them down, then they'll boil over, and then it's when you go to start it after the engine's hot, it'll be real hard to start, and that's a big indication of flooding. And if that's the case, if it runs just fine while it's cold, but it has problems when it's hot, I would definitely add a phenolic spacer if you don't have one, and I'd check your fuel pressure, because your pressure in the line will obviously increase as it sits and gets hotter. So that's something else to consider. And finally, I want to make a note of mechanical pumps. If they end in their duration just right, and they have more chance of ending in the duration than not, where they will hold pressure in the line. And then again, when you have any expansion in the line at all, and you're already at like 6 or 7 pounds of pressure that you run at, it doesn't take much to get 1 more pound of pressure in that little tiny line to then blow through your needle and seats and then flood your bowl and dump over into your engine. So, I've experienced some of this recently, and I just wanted to make a video to help some other people. If this is helpful, let me know. If I missed anything, let me know. So, hope it helps. Thanks.